Hello and welcome. So, here we do a take on Ayurveda and quantum sciences. So, why is quantum sciences to be considered as integral to understanding of Ayurveda? Is for many reasons. One of the prominent ones that I would put across here is, first of all, Ayurveda comes from a background where it aims to explain the existence of anything and everything in this universe in the form of five elements. The five elements being referred to as earth, water, fire, space, and air. Now, interestingly, what these words reflect is not the physical matter, but the essence that these carry, and the essence of it is how we can replicate it into the fact that this is universal. Universality of anything can only be established by the essence of the subject in discussion, the essence of the object concerned, and not by the physical properties of the same. When we talk about the five element theory, there's an interesting element that comes across, and it talks about translation of one element into the other, thereby changing its shape, its properties as a whole, and the ultimate elements that it represents. So, from space to earth, this flow exists, and it is also said that this is reversible. That this is reversible is established by the idea of the Tridosh, or the three compound theory, in two forms. The three compound theory assumes two triads. One triad aims to explain the physical nature of things, and the other triad aims to explain the philosophical or psychological aspect of things, or to say the psychological impact of the things. This is only possible when these five elements have interchangeable properties and they can translate into one another. Also, the text does say that all these six elements, coming as two triads, they coexist, and their coexistence is marked by variable degrees of their properties and proportions. So at any time, at any place, the triad, each of them individually is 100%, but in coexistence, to make that 100%, their proportions will necessarily variate, and if their proportions are variating, their properties and their integral characters will also change. Now, the fact that this is interchangeable correlates directly with one of the elements of physics, and that is interchangeability of matter. At the same time, Einstein's general theory of relativity also goes on to prove that while matter and its states are interchangeable, the complex of energy and matter is constant, which means that matter is translatable into energy and energy is translatable into matter. Also, from Einstein's general theory of relativity, it is derived that while this is matter and energy are interchangeable, even the subforms of matter or the constituents of matter should be interchangeable, or they should give rise to one form of or the other from the previous one. That means the matter in physical terms will translate and have different properties at it as it changes its form from one form to the other. The whole system has been recognized to the fact, even in physics, that ultimately there is a disorder, and nature by itself is bound to be disordered. So, the very character of disorderliness lends the idea that nature is expanding, the scope of nature is growing, but the system overall is contributing in such a way that the matter and energy relationship coexists and is the cause of annihilation of something in this universe, as also construction of something in this universe. This, when translated in the context of life, the period of gestation beginning from fertilization to newborn, and thereafter the disintegration from newborn till death, is a relationship where the process of entropy and enthalpy play a great deal. While enthalpy dominates the initial gestation part, entropy takes over the post-gestation part, that is life. The relationship between enthalpy and entropy is such that until entropy takes over, the diminishing property is not as visible, and there is an element of physical growth, physical constitution, or consolidation of physical matter. That is exemplified by the growth of individuals in the living system, in terms of their size, in terms of their volume, in terms of their mass. Now, this relationship is not biological. This relationship is not to be explained by any of the biological processes. The biological processes only are examples of certain elements of this entire relationship, where energy relationships are reflected by a single word called metabolism. But the construct that the world or the universe is 5 elements suggests that anything and everything has to originate from these 5 elements by the coming together of these 5 elements, and at the same time anything or everything has to disintegrate and annihilate into these 5 elements. This strange paradox, when modern biologists or modern medicine try to correlate, they fail to make a comparative such that it would be congruent, or in any other form, say, similar to the way they perceive. Also, the point here becomes that the perception of life and life processes is very, very limited, and it fails to outgrow the boundaries of Ayurvedic simulation of life. In another context, the understanding of medical science as of Ayurveda is a very limited understanding, and it only goes on to broaden when we start exploring beyond the life processes. That brings me to what I have repeatedly said at different fora, that Ayurveda or medicine is a mere application of pure sciences which comes from physics and chemistry, and mathematics not to be excluded at all. For that matter, mathematics is the language through which you can explain both physics and chemistry and give shape to various physics oriented phenomena. The explanation of existence of physical matter or non-physical matter is also derived only on the basis of a mathematical language which goes on to explain and communicate how these matter forms, they change their shape, they change their properties, and they contribute to their existence within the universe. Therefore, when we have to look at a paradigm which can explain Ayurveda in any modern scientific context, it can only explain a few things. Like evidence-based medicine, when you bring to Ayurveda, it will only be partially translatable, and it will only reflect in terms of cause and effect. Now here, the cause being abstract, because you cannot isolate the 5 elements, the effect is only and only reflection. Therefore, to juxtapose it in the context of modern medicine, it will fail. Similarly, the construct of biomolecular interactions will fail to acknowledge the Ayurvedic model of biochemistry, because when we look at modern biochemistry, it does start with 5 complexes: carbohydrates, proteins, fats, amino acids, and water. But through the different processes, it goes beyond these 5 and starts looking at individual compounds. And there, the primary construct of these biomolecules is lost. Whereas in case of Ayurvedic biochemistry, everything converges to the behavior of the 2 triads, and the 2 behaviors, the synergies, the overlaps, the constructive and destructive interference of the 2 triads ultimately goes on to the way the 5 elements interact. So the modern biochemical construct is again limited, and to bring Ayurveda onto the same construct will fail. Then the another aspect of modern medicine, drug development and drug action. Now, every drug development and every drug action is limited by the scope of action and interaction by the biochemical processes within the body and of the drug. Their mutual interactions So that limited chemistry again has a very closed arena in which it can be looked at, but to explain it in terms of Ayurveda, the very construct of these biomolecules is lost, because there again these biomolecules, the biochemical processes, etc., they are just splattered across. They lose their primary existence and the entire equation falls on the 5 elements. Given this idea, or given this understanding, or to say given the universality of application of the 5 element theory, the fact that modern medicine also is looking to explore future medicine in the context of quantum medicine only suggests that they have started looking beyond the 5 biomolecular constructs, and instead they are also trying to explore that smallest element which impacts the health of the individual, both in curative and in the disease form. Now, if I were to say that they are exploring the curative and disease form, the challenge here and the difference here between Ayurveda and modern medicine remains that end of the day, the science today, when it explores quantum medicine, it still looks for physical particle matter. It is not exploring the paradigm that matter and energy are interchangeable, because in the limited scope of interaction that we generally get to have with physicians in practice, they set aside the idea of energy interactions and limit it only to the form of heat absorbed or released in the form of ATP, whereas ATP again becomes a physical construct. When quantum sciences explore the whole idea, they do not look at any biomolecules. They even do not recognize the particle nature of matter all the time, and they between themselves shuffle across two theories. One is the particulate theory of matter, and one is the wave theory of matter. So when they talk about wave theory of matter and particulate theory of matter, they talk about the same thing, but they do not insist that the thing will always exist either as particle or waves, which means to say, and which goes on to correlate and establish the fact that matter and waves are interchangeable forms. We recognize waves because waves are substances which can be mapped, which can be physically explored, which have a physical shape, which form a physical construct, and that is why they can be seen under special circumstances. So still, it is not just pure energy which can only be experienced and not seen. Still, it is the idea where somewhere there is a thin line between matter and energy that brings together a form which perhaps becomes kind of neutral, which perhaps assumes a state where it has two different outlooks, two different, say, electrical charges, or to say two different spins, and those coexisting spins and or coexisting charges neutralize the impact. This very fine state where matter and energy are difficult to say as to which exact form do they represent and exist, is where quantum medicine or even Ayurvedic principles come to lie, and they forge a confluence such that in the modern context it can always be said that, barring the language being the difference, the concept is the same. Therefore, as a conclusion, it is to be said, number one, quantum medicine is the only form of quantum sciences, is the only form of modern science which will explain Ayurvedic principles. The second point is the reading, the understanding of Ayurveda needs to grow beyond the conventional curriculum, and the conventional curriculum is very, very premature to actually render a communication across the globe. The point number 3 here arises that Ayurveda as medicine remains a mere application of pure sciences, and essentially anybody studying Ayurveda needs to have a very strong understanding of mathematics, very strong understanding of physics, to be able to deliver the true essence of Ayurveda across. Point number 4 here would be that unless the relationship of matter and energy is well understood, it will be near impossible for any Ayurvedic student or any Ayurvedic teacher to convey the basic principles on which Ayurveda stands. And point number 5, given this construct, and if this construct is really understood in the right sense, the applications of Ayurveda, the treatment of Ayurveda as a science, the teaching of Ayurveda as medicine, all needs to graduate beyond a graduation level. It actually becomes a postgraduate science at the very inception, and an Ayurvedic student who is studying as a bachelor and is awarded a bachelor's qualification, if the curriculum is rightly revised in the right context, deserves to be awarded a bachelor's come postgraduate come super specialization qualification at the same time. But if we cannot do this, if we cannot deliver this refinement of curriculum of Ayurveda, we will never be able to justify the existence of a science which remains questioned, because you cannot, and by any means you cannot, justify the physical nature of Ayurveda barring the medicines that you produce and the way they work. Even the mode of action of Ayurvedic medicines is always questioned, because they don't work by single constituents, they work by a combination of constituents which among themselves have physical and chemical interactions, and within the body, once taken, they have their own different possible interactions. The multitude of interactions that is possible between these constituents is by far too many. On a mathematical scale of probability, the interactions are as many as possible, a few thousand at the same time. And how these few thousand interactions come together to metabolically synergize into an output is again a very huge exploration, which needs in-depth nuclear and quantum evaluations, just beyond the scope of modern biochemistry, just beyond the scope of modern drug discovery, just beyond the scope of modern drug delivery systems and assessments. Thank you.